fix Chelsea. Just what on earth is going on at Stamford Bridge? Well, to get to the answer, we need to step back and dive into the reign of Tuchel first, as that's where some of the root causes were established. Under Tuchel, Chelsea rapidly implemented an elite strategic framework that suited the personnel that they had at the time, and it was capable of winning an elite European competition. Now, just a brief overview as to why it worked. Thiago Silva, who'd been struggling with a back four, now had support in close proximity with that three-man backline, less space to cover. Similarly, Chilwell had less defending to do with Rudiger carrying the burden as a left centre-back. Jorginho was now protected by Kante, and with Mount as a versatile forward in that front three, he could drop back and almost make it a three-man midfield at times. Havertz had Werner there as a runner and someone that understood him through German football. Now, the team didn't have any world-class wingers, so it made sense that the world-class wing-backs were there to provide the width. So all of it seemed to make sense. The problem with this setup was that it became too stale and predictable. You could see Chelsea's attacks coming a mile off, and in the domestic competition, where you're having to break down reactive sides who don't leave much space in behind, are always preparing for you during the week, there just wasn't enough attacking variations within this framework, or enough viable tactical tweaks by Tuchel to manifest a league title campaign with that setup. Now, Tuchel was alert to this, and he knew that a change in personnel would be needed to give Chelsea some new angles and plays in attack. The problem was then, he spunked his transfer budget on Lukaku. Now, this would be the first and most significant nail in the coffin of Tuchel's Chelsea project. Lukaku would stifle Chelsea's fluidity and possession, and he wasn't clinical enough to merit a change in the way that they attacked. Compare that to how City have had to adapt due to the sheer force of Haaland's numbers. Now, the following season, Chelsea were competitive in cup competitions, but they finished almost 20 points off the top two, making no real steps forward in the league. And this was followed by another disappointing transfer window. The summer signings were not great once again, the likes of Cucurella, Koulibaly, and before long, Tuchel was gone to be replaced by Potter. So a stale tactical setup which needed quality reinforcements to perhaps provide a plan B or to make plan A even more dangerous, neither happened during the course of Tuchel's reign. We then move on to Potter's reign. Now, without wishing to labour the point, the recruitment under Potter's reign, or should I say Boehly's reign, has been much better, despite what the critics might have you believe. Mudryk, Madueke, Felix, Enzo, Badiashile are in my opinion quality talents, but there were still key recruitment concerns that were only partially addressed. Gusto was brought in as cover for the right wing-back position, but left at his original club, thus leaving Chelsea wholly reliant on Reece James, a man who is fundamental to Chelsea's decision to play a wing-back system and yet is perennially injured. Similarly, Kante replacement, an uber-talented yet untested 18-year-old in Andre Santos was signed, and again left back in Brazil, thus leaving Chelsea missing that one-man dynamo who does the hard running so that the team's deep-lying playmaker doesn't need to. Now, instead of buying these youngsters, in my opinion, more experienced, readily available options needed to be sought to rejuvenate this Chelsea project immediately. Now, moving those remaining recruitment issues to one side, let's look at the tactical issues that Potter failed to recognise. Firstly, why were Havertz and Felix constantly played together when they're very similar players? Both of them like to drop off. Neither really likes to penetrate the penalty area on a regular basis. There's just not enough goals in that duo for them to be played together. They're just cancelling each other out. We've spoken about Enzo not being given any defensive protection in midfield due to poor recruitment in that area, but why was someone like Zakaria not given a chance? Or just find a three-man midfield to do the job for you, flood that area to give him the support he needs, make that team a bit more stable from a defensive perspective. Why was Potter so slow to see the limitations of Cucurella, who has been totally overwhelmed with this move to Chelsea and lacks the aura and the defensive nous to start for a side of Chelsea's ilk, and then he keeps bringing him back into the side, and similarly Koulibaly, whose head has been gone for ages, just doesn't look at the races, and yet even when Badiashile was available, Koulibaly would somehow find his way back into the starting lineup. Now, aside from the tactics, there were other issues with which Potter struggled. The oversized squad. Now, you're a first-team manager. You are telling me that you can't do a Jose Mourinho and stamp your authority by selecting a core squad of 22 that you want to work with and just banish the others into the reserves and ask the club to deal with moving them on. He just wasn't strong and forthright enough to do that. And this lack of killer instinct fed into the perception that the job was simply too big for Potter. He hadn't earned the stripes to work with a club of that size and where the demands are elite. Now some will argue that the likes of Pep and Zidane were quite wet behind the ears before they took over the El Clasico jobs, but they'd learned from the best managers, they'd featured in the biggest games themselves as players, so they knew how these big clubs work. Which then brings us to the major question: how would I fix it? Well, I'd set up the squad in a way in which it can move from a 3-4-3 to a 4-3-3 in a seamless manner, so you can play both formations. Firstly, I'd focus on sticking with a front three which focuses on wide play and wingers, so Mudryk, Felix and Madueke I'd stick as a fixed front three and let them find rhythm, even if the results aren't there in the short term. And if someone like Nkunku comes in, he can feature in any of the front three roles. The key here is giving Chelsea that magic and zest in those wide areas, which has sorely been lacking in comparison to their rivals such as Liverpool, City and now Arsenal. I'd make Enzo's immediate partner a priority. So ideally you're looking for someone of a Valverde, Camavinga type profile. Obviously they're not realistic options. Santos does fit that mold, but we need a partner for the here and now. Could Rodrigo de Paul be a squad option perhaps? His face doesn't really fit at Atletico. Rice on paper seems a viable option. I'm not a huge fan of him, but tactically it makes sense in terms of compatibility. Caicedo would be my preferred option, someone who's like a mini Kante regen. I'd want more wing-backs in the squad. I'd sell Cucurella. He doesn't have the pace and penetration out wide to replicate what Chilwell provides, and he's a defensive liability. Gusto seems more defensive than James, so he could give that versatility for a back four and possibly even be able to play in a back five. So for now, let's just assume he's going to come good, but I'd still love for Chelsea to bring in the likes of Frimpong or even a Balde. They're relying on physically unreliable players in one of the most demanding roles in football, which necessitates a covering of the entire flank. So no wonder Chilwell and James keep breaking down. Fourthly, who's going to be Thiago Silva's replacement? They need someone that can play in a back four and not just in a back five, so that if they want to switch it up, they can. For me, Gvardiol would be the ideal libero option who can bring the ball out in a back three, but also be solid enough to handle a back four next to a Badiashile. Finally, the squad needs an orthodox striker option, so even if the starting 11 has got a front three which features a false 9, it's imperative to have a plan B to throw on to change things if plan A isn't working. And the profile needs to be of someone who's physically robust, can be a mobile target man, and be a presence inside the box and clinical when a chance presents itself. So you're looking at either a younger forward looking to bide his time and potentially become a starter option, that's probably ideal, or even an experienced head who doesn't care if he doesn't grab a lot of minutes, but grabs key goals in the here and now. So either you're looking at Evan Ferguson, Højlund type of striker, or even a Mitrovic, Tony type figure. So there you go, that's how I'd fix it. Which manager would I trust to carry out the rebuild of this project? Well, you'll have to wait for our next video to see that. Anyway guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, share and subscribe, and see you guys again next time. Bye.
Spare for Guardiola, joy for Mourinho.